Hi, everybody. So for today's lecture, we're going to be going over how to create a prospectus for your research paper. So your prospectus is the other half of your annotated bibliography sort of planning portion of your research paper. So usually we have these two things that go together that help us plan for the paper ahead of time. So generally, I say I would recommend writing the annotated bibliography first. So if you haven't already done that, then I recommend going back and doing that first and then coming to the prospectus. Okay, so the first step in creating your prospectus. Number one, we want to look at the prompt. So all of this information is in your research paper packet, which was given to you at the beginning of the research paper sort of section of class. So you can go back in the modules and find that document if you don't have it already. In that, you can see the directions for the prospectus along with a sample, so you know what this looks like. So the different things that you need for the prospectus. This is a written document with several paragraphs, and it's actually single-spaced, so it looks a little bit different than other MLA format stuff. Each paragraph should have about 5 to 8 sentences, and each one should discuss your plans for the essay. You're going to use these as a guide as you start to write your actual paragraphs that will go into the essay. And for this document, it's okay to say things like, I will talk about this part of the problem, or I will discuss this as a potential solution. In your prospectus, that language is totally fine because this is just a planning document. But those I will statements need to be gone by the time you turn in the essay, so just keep that in mind. So think of the prospectus as sort of organized notes to yourself. Each paragraph is going to be a really basic outline for a whole section of your essay. So things that you're going to need for the prospectus. Number one, you'll need your working thesis statement. You should also have a paragraph that gives us an overview of the problem, big picture solutions, and individual steps we can take. And from there, you'll have a paragraph about each of those sections in more depth. So a paragraph about the problem, a paragraph about big picture solutions to the problem, and a paragraph about steps that individuals can take to address this problem. And remember that these are planning paragraphs. So these are just your notes to yourself about what you're going to discuss in that section of the essay. So you should have a working thesis by this point, and you'll use the same one for this assignment. Just copy it straight from your annotated bibliography. If you haven't written one yet, you can still use the thesis template to write one now. And this is our example thesis here. So you can just fill in the blanks here if you don't have a thesis statement yet, so that you wind up with one. After you have your thesis statement ready to go, then you need to write a paragraph that tells us about your entire essay really briefly. In this paragraph, you should include your thesis statement. Then you should tell me what problem you're going to discuss, tell me the big picture solutions you'll discuss, and then tell me what types of individual involvement you'll discuss. So this is just a really basic overview of the entire project. Now, remember that you're not going to get into detail about any of this stuff. You'll just tell me, briefly what we're talking about. So for instance, let's say I'm discussing human trafficking. I could say I'm going to talk about human trafficking in the US and elsewhere. Or I'm going to talk about human trafficking and I'll discuss both sex trafficking and labor trafficking. So these are just really basic overviews to help me get an understanding of where you're going with this project. After you've written that brief overview paragraph, then you're going to write one paragraph each about those other sections in your research paper. So remember that you need to have several pages in your research paper that talk all about the problem. And for your prospectus, what you're doing is giving me an overview of that section. So what types of things are you going to talk about in regards to your problem? So some things that you might include in this paragraph: will you be talking about who is affected? Will you be telling me where this problem occurs? Maybe you'll be talking about how long this has been happening and giving me some history of the problem. Maybe you'll talk about different factors that contribute to this problem. So those are just some places that you can, choose to go. But the purpose here is to get thinking about, what am I going to do to fill that section of my research paper? So what different aspects of the problem do I want to look into and address? And I would recommend looking at your sources for some guidance here with part of it. Because if you have information about, sex trafficking in America, for example, then you might want to plan on writing a paragraph about how and where this happens in our country. For instance, who is affected? Where does it occur? So use your sources to help you decide where to go with some of these things. So that's the first paragraph. Tell me which aspects of the problem you'll discuss. Remember that all of this is subject to change. So if it makes it into your prospectus and then at the last minute when you're writing, you sort of change or cut something, that's fine. This is just a planning tool. So once you've written a paragraph about where you're going with the problem, then you'll also need to write a paragraph about where you're going with those big picture solutions. So the next section of your research paper ultimately will be about these big picture solutions. And in your prospectus, you're just writing a paragraph that tells me, your plans for that section. So some things that you might include here: you might talk about which laws need to change and how they need to change, or which ways of thinking need to shift and how. You can also plan on discussing which big picture solutions have been tried and whether or not they worked. If they did work, then maybe you plan on going into how we can, take those ideas and put them into place or into practice somewhere else. So these are just some places that you might go with this, section. But certainly if you have your own ideas, that's what needs to be, in there as well. So one paragraph giving me sort of a general overview of what that section of your paper is going to address. Next, you're going to write a paragraph about how individuals can get involved to help support those big picture solutions. So remember, we're thinking here about, in my essay, I'm going to write this big section on individual involvement. Here are some of the things I want to look at in that section, right? So some things you might include: are there organizations that we can join? Are there movements that we can start or join? And anything else that individuals can do to affect the kind of change that you want to see happening. So that's your final paragraph for the prospectus. Once you have all of those paragraphs written, then you need to create one document with all of your paragraphs. The document should look like the sample that you see in the research paper packet. And then you want to keep this handy as you work on your essay, because you should use it as a guide to help keep you on track as you write. Once your prospectus is ready, save it as a docx or PDF file, and that's what you're submitting to Canvas. So quick recap. Number one, make sure that you understand the assignment. This is another planning tool. So in this assignment, it's okay to say, in my problem section, I want to talk about labor trafficking and sex trafficking in America. I also want to talk about labor trafficking and sex trafficking in Cambodia, for instance. So it's okay to have those kinds of I will statements in this document as well, because this is just a tool to help you plan for your essay. So make sure you understand the focus and the purpose of the assignment. Then get your thesis or write it. You can grab it from your annotated bibliography, or you can use the template to write it if you haven't written one yet. Then you're going to write the paragraphs that you need to have for this particular assignment. So your first one is that overview paragraph, including your thesis. The next one is a paragraph about the problem section of your essay. The next paragraph is about the big picture solution section of your essay. And then that last paragraph is about the individual involvement section of your essay. So remember that each paragraph is going to tell me sort of what do you plan on addressing in these sections in the essay itself. Put all of that together on one document, make sure it's a PDF or docx, and then submit that to Canvas. As always, if you need help, you'll need to ask a tutor, ask myself, lean on your groups. We've got lots of resources to help you, so don't be afraid to ask for help if you need it.